Okay, so this is my first class for Tafshin Pei Vav, so Shana Tova. And Baruch Hashem, we sort of need, but don't need to start with Shir Malach. Hopefully we won't have to go back to that. But we still want to pray that things continue to be quiet. Our topic today relates to Parshat Lech Lecha, because that's what we try to do. But our title was Changing Names. Now, where do we have a name change in Parshat Lech Lecha? A famous one. Avraham to Avraham, we all know that. Are there any other name changes in Sefer Bereshit? Sarai, Sarah, Veder, Yaakov, Yisrael. There's a lot of name changing going on, right? And when it comes to our ancestors. When it comes to God, it also happens, doesn't it? Because when Chumash starts off, remember 2 weeks ago, we start with Elohim, correct? And then Perek Vet, God's name is Yud Kei Vav Kei Elohim. And like the Bible critics have a heyday with all that. And so the Parshanim. And then before the flood, Elohim gets angry, Yud Kei Vav Kei gets angry. Remember? 2 reasons for the flood, 2 reasons after the flood. But consistently, Chumash is using those 2 classic names for God. The classic explanation is there's a God who made what's called nature, which goes by a set of rules. Things are pretty much set, called laws of physics, laws of nature, growth. That's the 6 or 7 days of creation. And even though ancient man thought that's many gods, Chumash is claiming, even though it appears to be many gods, many powers, it's really one God. And how does Chumash teach us that? By naming our one God, many gods. Remember that? Elohim means many gods. Conjugating that name for many gods in the singular is teaching us that what appears to be many powers is really one power. But that Elohim, who made nature, who controls nature, also watches over our history and is involved with us. And to be involved, that's lihot, to be. And therefore, when God's more involved with man and gives him commandments and has expectations and rewards and punishes, that's going to be Yud Kei Vav Kei. That's like nice and I oversimplified a really complicated topic, but that's like a nice simple explanation, I think. Now, in this week's parsha, do we have any new names for God? So very good. You've mastered your Tanakh. So, when we have Yud Kei Vav Kei, we're trained not to read those letters unless you're a witness. No one got that. Someone got that. Okay. But what we say Adon, right? Because it means master. So we don't want to mention his name, but we refer to him as our master. But who was the first person in Chumash to call God my master? Want to take a wild guess? No. Avraham Avinu. Right? He's the first one to call God Adon. In the story where God tells him your kids are going to be slaves. That's going to be in Perek Vav. And there's another, possibly another name for God, according to Chazal in the previous parsha. No, but remember Makit Tzedek, Melech Shalem? He talks about Elyon, and then Avram clarifies Yud Kei Vav Kei Elyon. So is Elyon our God? Because he's Konei Shemayim Ba'aretz. We sort of claim that in Shmoneh Esrei, I think. We sort of quote that, and we're referring to that understanding. That's why Chazal understand Malki Tzedek as Shem, Noach's son, who was the first Rosh Yeshiva, wasn't he? Just one last joke for the fun of it, and then we'll get started. Yeshivat Shem Ve'ever, you've heard of? Okay. Now, where was it located? That's where our ancestors studied. No one knows where Yeshivat Shem Ve'ever was located? No. You've never been to Tzfat? Who's seen Yeshivat Shem Ve'ever in Tzfat? There's a big Knesset Shem Ve'ever in Tzfat. Right next to the Citadel? It's there. It's in Tzfat. There's a place there's a cave of Shem Ve'ever, there's a big Knesset Shem Ve'ever, and there's a Masorah in Tzfat that Yeshivat Shem Ve'ever was in Tzfat. And there's a real good reason for it. Why? Because in yeshivos, there's 2 types of Torah study. This was called Nigla and Nistar. You've heard of that? Nigla is the revealed Torah that we study, and Nistar is the hidden, the Kabbalah stuff. Now, in Yeshivat Shem Ve'ever, were they learning Nigla? Why couldn't they be learning Nigla? It wasn't Nigla yet. So by default, what were they learning? Nistar. Now, if you're learning Nistar, where's the best place to learn Nistar? In Tzfat. Okay. That's my routine. Okay. Okay, now we'll start to share. That was just a stall. No. But the title for the shir is the idea of change. I just talked about changing names. Yeah. Oh, by the way, that wasn't a joke. I mean, that's a joke. 1 second. Because what was the name of the Rosh Yeshiva in the first yeshiva? Who was the Rosh Yeshiva? Shem. Now, who named him Shem? Who named Shem? Noach. But why? What? To make a name for who? For God. And what's the proof? Because when Noach gets sober and finds out what his kids were doing, he's pretty angry with Ham and Canaan, but he blesses who? Well, he blesses God. And what's he call God? Baruch Hashem Elohei Shem, which means, who is God? The God that Shem talks about. Like in shul this morning, someone mentioned they were thanking God, Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov. Does that mean the God who took care of Avraham, or the God that Avraham talked about? Yeah. Well, if you read Parshat Lech Lecha, what's Avraham do for a living? He calls out and he makes a name for God. That's in Perek Yud Bet. He's a Semite. He's a shepherd. He's a shepherd. That's right. His son is a bit farmer and a shepherd, and that's how you make it. You make the idea of making a name for God is a big theme. So the word Shem is also there, and you mentioned Makom. That's also in this week's parsha, because the Makom HaMizbeach, where he calls in God's name, is called the Hamakom, and that comes up over and over again. And if you need comfort, we stop by the Shofar. That's called. Remember Hamakom Menachem Leibtag? Is that Yerushalayim or is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Ask your local rabbi. Now let's get started. But that was in my introduction that's the title. I'm trying to understand all these names. There's one more shame we didn't talk about, real quick.
No. Yeah. And then, before that thing, when Avraham speaks to God, he says Hashem. He says Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, but it's a different Nekudos. And as a Balkari, you read it Hashem Elokim. Yeah,
that's our minhag, because we don't want to say. Once we decided, whenever you have Yud Kei Vav Kei, you say Adon. So what happens when you have Yud Kei Vav Kei Adon? So they say Adon Elokim. It gets confusing. Ask your local Balkari teacher, Bar Mitzvah teacher. Now back to Chumash. Now
one other name.
That's the topic today. Our topic is that special name of what people call Kel Shakai, but Chumash says El Shaddai, and Rabbi Yoel Ben Nun gets really angry when people don't say it properly. I'll try to explain why. Now, we'll get started, okay? Now, in this shul, quite often they have what's called a bris. Why do people make brises in the shul? Because you have a catering hall, right? There's limited parking, but better than downtown Yerushalayim. Now, you've all been to a bris, right? Ask the average person, what does bris mean? And what would they tell you? Circumcision, right? In the association game, a bris means were you circumcised? Now, but the word bris in Hebrew is called brit, which doesn't mean circumcision. What does it mean? Covenant. Now, the circumcision covenant is in Sefer, in Parshat Lech Lecha. It's the last aliyah, so it suffers a little bit. Because the last aliyah always suffers. Because if it was the first pasuk, like the first aliyah in Parsha everyone knows, and all the Parshim talk about, when you get to Shvi, I call it Shvi syndrome, where there's less Parshanim, people run out of steam by the end of the Parsha. Now, what I want to try to understand is, let's say you're in a bris, okay? And you ask someone this question, it means covenant. So, what is the covenant of Brit Milah? Is that question clear? There's lots of covenants. Do we have a covenant in last week's Parsha? The rainbow. Was the covenant about rainbows? It wasn't about rainbows. It was covenant between who and who? Who and whom? What? Between God and humankind, or maybe even all creation. It has two parties, so it's called Bain, Bainu Bain. And what does the rainbow have to do with it? The rainbow is not the covenant. Yes. It's a sign of the covenant, but what's the covenant? The Keshet is an oath brit. Remember, it's at the mile, we start Ois Brit Kodesh. So there's a sign of a brit. But what's the brit? So the brit of the rainbow covenant is God promising never again. Not to start over again. But what's the covenant of circumcision covenant? I don't care what the answer, I care, but not important to me the answer. Most people could not answer that question. Agreed? Whereas most people ask them at a bris, what covenant are we talking about? They'll have no idea. They'll be surprised by the question even. And in my opinion, it's a really important question. So the goal of the shir today is to understand what's the brit of Brit Milah. Understand? What's the covenant? And why is it introduced with a brand new name for God, which will be, we call El Shaddai. Understand? That's the goal of today's shir. Now, how are we going to do this? Oh, I'll give that a thing. I want to show you something. I want to begin with one last question. There's a commandment in the Bible called, flip it around. What's the first commandment of the Bible? Plural. That we all know, correct? Now, is that a commandment for all humankind or just for the Jewish people? Well, we'll take a quick vote, okay? Who would say it's a commandment for all humankind? Okay? And who says it's only for the Jewish people? You must have read the Talmud, huh? Yeah? Oh, no? Yeah, it's not one of the seven Noachite laws. I'm pretty sure. Ask anyone in Chabad. It's not one of the seven Noachite laws. Correct? It's not there. Because they're all known it. What?
Because we see opinions that my boy was Megayer and he had kids beforehand.
Oh, that's, yeah. Now we're talking Talmud, yeah.
No, but so therefore, if there's certainly logic that if he satisfies his mitzvah peru by, at least of course some opinions, by what he did before he became a Jew, so it has to be a mitzvah for a boy too.
Oh, yeah. That's who he marries. Okay.
Huh?
I mean, he has to do it within wedlock. He has to get married first. Anyway, that's a complicated halachic issue. All I'm getting at is that why did everyone raise their hand and think it's one of the Noachite laws?
Because Hashem said it at the time of Rachel. He said it to man,
because we weren't chosen yet. Yeah, but the rabbis, it says in Masechet Sanhedrin Daf Noach Nun Chet. It's really cool. That's just a coincidence. That's where they talk about it, and the rabbis do somersaults and reach what conclusion? It's only a commandment for the Jewish people. Got that? Now I want to show you how they read Chumash, and that's going to be an introduction to what's going on. Okay? You with me? Open up from last week. Go back to Perek Tet in your Chumash. Go to Perek Tet in Sefer Bereshit, and look at Pasuk Aleph, and tell me who's talking to whom. Chumash, Perek Tet in Bereshit. If everyone wants an English Hebrew, there's one art scroll here. Someone wants. Perek Tet, Pasuk Aleph, chapter 9. Perek Tet. Okay. Who's talking to whom? Okay. Elohim is talking to Noach and his sons, because they have to do all the work now. Okay, Noach and his sons. And what's the first thing he tells them? Pururvu. Nice and simple.
Are we assuming that Vayomer that comes after that refers to Hashem carrying on talking, or might be not?
Well, I'll answer your question with a question for everybody. If you were punctuating this sentence, where do I need to put a quotation mark? Remember punctuation? Remember? Yeah.
Right before the word Peru.
Right. There's a quotation mark right before Pururvu, correct? Now, use your heads for a minute, and tell me, where would you close the quotation mark? In other words, when does God finish talking to Bnei Noach? He says, Pururvu milot haaretz, and they're still going to fear you. Remember on them? And now that your flood's over, hey, you can eat meat. Remember that? And if you eat meat, don't eat the animal alive. Kill it first. And don't eat what's called Ibra Minachai. And then it says, oh, you can kill an animal to eat it, but you can't kill another human being unless he votes left wing. And I was just joking. Okay. And remember, shofech dam adam b'adam dam shofech, etc. Right, that's pasuk vav. Now, so where do I close the quotation mark? At the end of what pasuk? At the end of pasuk zayin. Agreed? Now, what's the problem with that? Right, what's problematic about pasuk zayin? It's a repeat of pasuk aleph. Now, if you know Chumash is called inclusion, or it's called a chiasm. Yeah, but it's an envelope structure where the first line and last line match each other. That's a simple reason. The rabbis don't read it that way. The rabbis claim that Noach's sons are not hard of hearing, and they quote the quotation mark at the end of pasuk vav. Okay? That's God talking to Noach. And the way the rabbis read it, Masechet Sanhedrin, They have a new, Pasuk Zayin is something new. Vatem is no longer B'nai Noach. Who's Vatem? You. Standing in Shul, you standing in Har Sinai. Vatem, you my Jewish people, Atem Purvu, Shirtu Batzaruhuba. That's what the rabbis do in Masechet. Notice, the Chiyuv D'Oraita of the Jewish people to do Purvu, the rabbis learn from Pasuk Zayin. Everyone...
It doesn't apply until after Matan Torah. I mean, it's not.
So they do somersaults to get that. That's a Gemara share. Right? I'm going to explain what they're up to. We'll see what they're up to in a minute. Now, what's their anchor for that? Because there's a strange word in Pasuk Zayin. Puravu makes sense, but there's a new word that we didn't have before. Shirtzu, which means that good or bad? Bad. Yeah, I mean there's like 8 shrotzim, but shrotzim also means to swarm. Now, is that verb ever used again in relation to the Jewish people?
Yes.
You remember? It's our first Aliyah, so we know it. Remember, Elish B'nei Yisrael by Mitzrayim, Yaakov, we get list names. Okay, Uvnei Yisrael, Paru, Vayishurtzu, Vayirbu, V'yatzmu V'od, and then Melech Hadash, Hinei Am B'nei Yisrael. So who fulfills that pasuk? Vatem Purvu Shurtzu Ba'aretz. Am Yisrael coming get in Egypt. See how the rabbis read it? They're onto something big, because they don't read Chumash; they study Chumash. But that's how they. That's part of the. That's their exegetic acrobatics, maybe something like that, of how they get to the conclusion. But there's going to be a good reason why the Jewish people are obligated to have children. For humankind, it's a blessing, because the blessings of Breshit are basically DNA, our nature. Because who else got Purvu? Who's the first? What was the first created item to get Purvu as a blessing? The fish, back on day 5. So all living things, because and they don't do it because they're commanded, it's built into their DNA, if I understood my biology class. Correct? Animals reproduce, not because they're commanded, because they're normal, because that's their nature. In other words, in general, in order for a living item to stay alive, it has to eat. It's called appetite. That comes natural. And for the species to stay alive, you have to reproduce. So those are basic ta'avot that are built into our DNA. And that's a blessing that God made that system where life continues itself. Now, in light of that, that idea of Purvu is going to come up again. Now in Pasuk Chet, we have a covenant, right? Who's talking to who now? There's a new Parshiah. And who's talking in Pasuk Chet? Elohim is talking to Noach, and what's he tell him now? Let's take a quick read. Vani hinei briti itchem, something like that. 1 second. Yeah. Perek tet pasuk. Sorry, pasuk tet. That's right. Vayom Elohim Noach ve'abanav bito lemor. Vani, listen to this. Ani hinei mekim et briti itchem. Ve'etzarachem achrechem. I'm making a brit with you and all your offspring. And everything that I created. Not just from day 5, also everything on day 5. Not just humans, also animals, also fish, also birds, right? Everything. I'm sorry, the birds survived, but I mean the fish don't need it because they survived the flood. But everything that was destroyed in the flood, every living thing. And yeah, now look at Pasuk Yud Aleph. Everything came out of the Teva. Pasuk Yud Aleph. Vakimot yet briti itchem. See that phrase? What's that mean? That defines the brit, which is what? What's the brit? Vakimoti brit itchem lo yikares kol basar od mibnei hamabul lo yedmabu l'shachet haaretz. God's promising in a covenant never to bring a flood again or start over again. Okay, and then Elohim says, "Zot ota brit asher ani noten beni ubenechem v'nefesh chaya asher itchem ledot olam et kashin natati ba'anan v'ayta lo od brit beni uben haaretz v'einam ba'anan kabadi," etc. Zacharti et briti, we mumble this in Zichronot, if I remember correctly. Didn't we say that in Zichronot? If I remember. Okay, Vaita keshe ba'anan. Okay, v'ayiti et lizkor brit olam ben Elohim uben nefesh chaya asher b'zafudei v'ayim Elohim zot ot brit asher chimoti beni uben kol habasar asher haaretz. It's very verbose, isn't it? But what's a brit olam mean? Olam means eternal. Olam in Chumash always means for eternity. In Lashon Chachamim, it means like the globe, but in Tanakh, it always means forever. So a Brit Olam means an eternal covenant, and that means nature is always going to be there. Last week's Haftarah, Isaiah, remember? Why did we read Ranei Kel Lo Yalada? Because Kimei Noach Zotli. Okay, actually that'll be our topic next year about why Yeshua was talking about Noach. Because just like God's brit with Noach is eternal for all generations with all nature. That nature is not going to change. His brit with Am Yisrael also is forever. Okay, so that's what's called brit. That's the rainbow covenant. But what pasuk defined the covenant? If I need one pasuk that defines the covenant, what pasuk is that? Yud Aleph, right? Because what's the opening phrase? Vakimoti et Briti. Now, before you forget all that, fast forward to Perek Yud Zayin in Breshit, and I'll play teacher for a minute. I want you to find me in Perek Yud Zayin the matching pasuk for Vakimoti et Briti. See if you have the same phrase. Put it this way. Just scan on your own for a second. Perek Yud Zayin in Breshit, and see how many phrases are similar. Right? Which pasuk is it? Pasuk Dalet is similar. What's it say there? Vani Itchem, but it doesn't define the Brit yet. Okay. Yeah, pasuk Zayin is bingo, isn't it? See pasuk Zayin? Vakimoti et Briti. So if I want to find out what is the Brit Milah, the answer is going to be right in front of me. So now we're going to read it and figure it out. Do you follow what we did so far? I'm trying to show you I need Brit Keshet to appreciate Brit Milah. Now, if you were my students and we had a couple hours, I would tell you, from the time God speaks B'Shem Elokim to Noach in Perek Tet, try to find out when's the next time Elokim says anything again in Chumash. In other words, Elokim's been talking ever since day one, hasn't he? He hasn't stopped. Like Elokim says Yehior, Elokim talks to creation, Elokim talks before the flood, he talks after the flood. Elokim's talking a lot, and then he talks after the flood with Brit, called Brit Keshet. And want to take a wild guess when the next time Elokim talks again? Here, right? Who takes over after Brit Keshet? Who starts controlling things? Yud Kei Vav Kei. The first time Elokim comes back into the picture is going to be with Brit Milah. That's significant, isn't it? If you study Chumash, not read it. And don't be surprised we'll find Pru Uru again. And things like that. Now let's go back to, now in light of that, let's read Perek Yud Zayin. Remember all the key words? And then I'm going to give you a nice review with this on the source sheet in a minute. What are we up to? Perek Yud Zayin. Let's read. Avraham was 99, and Yud Kei Vav Kei appears to him, because ever since Lech Lecha, who's been talking to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? It's been Yud Kei Vav Kei. Don't be surprised. I say it 7 times, you'll believe it. Yud Kei Vav Kei is Elokim. Isn't he? We said that all together, didn't we, at the end of Yom Kippur? And if you were at Hakafas, what was the first line in Hakafas? What are the psukim we read before Hakafas? Ata hareisa ladat, ki yud kei vav kei hu Elokim, enod mevado. So let's get it straight. It's the same God. We just use 2 names for him to explain the complex relationship. Want to know why? Read Lonely Man of Faith and get confused. No, Adam 1, Adam 2, but that's a philosophy class. I'm just talking Chumash. Now, so Yud Kei Vav Kei appears to Avram and tells him, I have a new name, Ani El Shaddai, with a really cool phrase, Hitalech lefanai v'yatamim, which is sort of a command, isn't it? Now, have we ever heard that phrase before? Hitalech. In Gan Eden? Oh, God was mitalech in the Gan, but how about man mitalech? The first educator. Remember, isn't Chanoch an educator? I mean, we get the word chinuch from there. And he's in the list of all the genealogies, but God takes him way early before the flood. Why? Because Vaytalech Chanochim Elokim. And God take him because God Elokim took him. And it sounds like for a good reason. Sort of protected him. But isn't it cool that chinuch comes from Chanoch? Or Chanoch comes from chinuch? It might be just a coincidence, or maybe Chumash is teaching you something. Don't go into education if you want to. Unless you want to be with God. Now, then, I need a reason. Why did God pick Noach over anyone else? No, God didn't see Noach was a tzaddik and therefore destroy everyone else. God realized this is no good. Remember, God reached the conclusion man is bad and he has to start over again. But for the purpose of recreation, he needs a CEO. Correct? Now, why is Noach chosen to be the CEO? You know what that means, CEO? Okay, chief executive officer. Noach is in charge of recreation, and he's in charge of getting all the, keeping the species going, etc. And why does Chumash explain why God picked Noach over anyone else for the job? Because he was a tzaddik, in his door. Now the rabbis, of course, can't compare him to Avraham Avinu, but that's Chazal. But in Chumash, the reason is simple. We're not explaining why God's destroying everybody else and why He saved Noach. Why did God pick Noach over anyone else for the purpose of recreation? Doesn't mean no one else was righteous, but God decides I'm starting over again, and I need to understand why God picked Noach of all people for the purpose of recreation. But therefore Noach names his oldest son, or important son, Shem, because when creation starts over again, he needs a rabbi to talk about God. And his name will be Shem, I think. Now, let's continue. We're back in Perek Yud now. So Guy has a new name now. Ani El Shaddai. That's what Noach was. That's what Avram needs to be. Both Avram and Noach are chosen for two different reasons. Noach was chosen for what he was, for a one-time purpose. Avram is chosen for what he needs to be. Noach had a really important job. Once his job is over, what happens when you have a really important job and then nothing to do anymore? No, you yeah. Now back to Perek Yud. No. So Yud Kei Vav Kei, my new name is El Shaddai, and that Nabriti Beini U'Beinecha rings a bell now. Remember Beini U'Bein? Va'abertcha b'mod mod. That ring a bell? Remember Pu'urvu? By Pavram al Panav, by Daber Ito Elohim Libor. Now Elohim speaks now for the first time since the flood, since after the flood. Okay. Bani hinei briti itach, like we said to Noah. Va'ita la'av goyim. Is that the reward for the brit, or the purpose? Is that the purpose of the brit? What's av here mean? Av hamon goyim. It's a machloket parshanim. It sounds like you're going to be the father of many nations, including Esav and Amalek and Ishmael. That doesn't seem to be what's going on, is it? So another way to understand it is like Avraham. Who's Avraham? We shochen b'amromim, but who are we talking to? Now, what do you mean he's the father of Rachamim? There was Av before. Who is the father of all metalwork? And who is the father of all not farming, shepherding? And who is the father of all music? Remember Lamech's sons? Yaval, Yuval, and Tuval? Each one was the Av of something. I'll give you an example later on. The brothers tell Yaakov, hey, Yosef's alive, and what's his new job? He's an Av. Yosef tells the brothers, I'm an Av to Paro. He wasn't his father, but what was he? He was a mentor to Paro. An Av can mean a mentor. And therefore, if there's someone you learn something from, so if we learn mercy from God, we call him Avraham. So Machloket Ashkenaz and Sfard, during the Aser Timei Tshuva, what do we say? It's the line we add. Mi chamocha, Avrahaman or Avrahamim? Isn't that great? And you understand the Machloket? Is God? Do we want God to be merciful, or do we want God to teach us to be merciful? When God's Avraham, Chazanim know that. Remember? It's a nice song. But it's a really good word, isn't it? If you believe in Imitato Deo, we learn Rachamim from God, because that's Midot Rachamim. There's a holiday called Yom Kippur that we scream about it. Now that's so Av can also mean a mentor. Now, does that make sense that Avram is chosen to be a mentor for other nations? Like to be this? Oh, we'll talk about that in Yishayahu. Are we chosen to be like a light to other nations? Are we chosen to be a nation other nations can learn from? Do we have to be the example of behavior that other nations can see and appreciate and learn from, and through that come to appreciate God? So it could be that Brit Milah has a lot to do with being this idea of being a light to other nations. I think Shadal talks about it in the Netziv. Now, so Beit Avraham, and it's so important. Avram gets a name change to make sure he remembers that. And instead of Avram, He's called now Avraham. Why? Ki ab hamun netaticha. Netaticha means I'm giving you a job. Yeah, question.
Okay, so I'd like to just suggest that
Yeah.
The keshet is not exactly like a covenant.
No, the keshet is not a covenant. It's a rainbow.
The keshet is a zichronot.
It's an oath. Yeah.
And so everything that in a way sort of like goes forward to Brit Milah, that the blood is also zichron. That we remember what this is, the covenant because of the blood.
Which blood?
The blood of...
Oh, okay, yeah, blood of, sorry, yeah, but it's good, but the word blood isn't here. No, the Gemara talks about blood. But in Chumash, the word blood is not here. Now, it could be there's something behind it, but I want to see what Chumash says about it. So that's a good point, but for some reason the word dam is not here, even though there's something very symbolic about dam. We'll get to that when that has to do with korbanot. We'll see. Because dam is related to man in many ways. Because man is Adam from Adamah. Remember, God makes an Ed, Aleph Daled, and then makes Adam, Aleph and Men from Adamah. But keeps him alive is Adam. But that's biblical wordplay. Now let's go back to that's Avraham. Now look at Pasuk Vav. V'ifreiti otcha b'mod ma'od, u'taticha lagoyim u'mlachim mimeka mimcha yitzeo. Got that? See, we had plural. Babel otcha, now v'ifreiti otcha. And I'm giving you. What's I mean? God's giving. He's giving us a job for the sake of nations, right? And we're going to have leadership coming from this nation. In order to be a nation representing God, you need to be sovereign. You need to be a nation people look up to, and therefore, this nation will have nation. Right now, Avraham just doesn't have any children yet, but one day he's going to be the father of a great nation that will affect other nations. Now comes our big line. Now let's read Pasuk Zayin together and try to understand what is the Brit of Brit Milah. Okay? It's the exact same wording we had by the flood. The Brit Olam, also a repeat, Brit Olam, eternal Brit. To be your God and for all future generations. So what's the Brit of Brit Milah? What's the Brit of Brit Milah now? What's the covenant? What did it just say? What's the corollary? Vatem tu li la'am. In shul this morning, someone said, they said Shema, and he said, the whole reason God took us out of Egypt was to do this. Ani Hashem Elokechem, asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim. There we go. Why did God give us the land of Israel? So that there could be a place where we can fulfill this purpose. That's the next line, isn't it? In order to fulfill this goal of God being our God, our boss, and we being His people, then I'm giving you and your land, and you and your people a land, the land you're sojourning in, Eretz Canaan, and there I'll be your God. Now the Rambam does, he's a super Zionist there, the Ramban, remember? Remember the famous Ramban in this pasuk? He's only our God in the land of Israel, and if you're in Chutz La'aretz, you're only doing it for practice. Yeah, I guess if this was Torah Mitzion Kol, I'd go more into detail about it. But, it is. That means you know this already, so I don't have to tell you. Now, but again, the Brit is not the land of Israel, but rather, the land of Israel it's a vehicle through which we can accomplish the goal of the Brit. The Brit is to be our God. Remember at the Seder we have those 4 cups? Cup number 4. And then you know that what? Ani, Hashem Elechem, and that's why I took you out of Egypt. Then, remember? The 4 cups. If you remember Parshat Nitzavim Bahar, Atem Nitzavei Mem Kochem Difnei Hashem Elokechem, Roshechem Shavabam, Laman, it's a Rishon, Laman Hakimotcha Hayom Lo, Vu Yelacha, Kasher Diber Lach, B'Seir Har Sinai, V'Chasher Nishba Labatecha. Well, now it makes sense, doesn't it? Okay. I'm getting at the Brit of Chumash. He's our boss, and we're His people. On Yom Kippur, we say this beautiful song and said it 12 different ways. Anu Amecha, At Eloheinu. Remember? Anu Banecha, At Avinu. Anu Tzonecha, At Rainu. Remember that? Anu Skulatecha, At Eloheinu. It's from Har Sinai, we'll see. Anu Mamirecha, At Mamirenu. Anu Rayatecha, At Dododenu. One time, instead of writing a test, I just gave my students, take this list from our Yom Kippur davening, that good song, and find me the source of each phrase. Was that a good test?
Yeah.
There's a search right there. It's an easy test to write, and we put the kids to work. So one kid figured out and everyone else copied. It's called school. That's how to learn how to get through life. Now, so let's continue now, okay? So now we have all the parallels. We have, but you see, it's a theme through Chumash, isn't it? Okay. Then it says what? Zed bot asher tishmu b'ni benechem, etc. Himol lechem kol zachar. Pasuk Yud Aleph. Unmaltem et b'sa'ol latchem, v'yal od brit b'ni benechem. Isn't it obvious now how the similarity between Brit Keshet and Brit Milah? I didn't explain why yet, but you can't miss the parallel. Okay. And then Ben Shmonat Yamim Himoch, etc. And then last line, Vayta Briti b'Yisrachem Devrit Olam again. Barel Zachar Shol Yimol Lo Latav. Why are you chayv karet if you don't do Brit Milah? It's a mitzvah taseh, but I didn't do anything because karet means you're cut off from the covenant. If Brit Milah is your entrance to the covenant, if you have the opportunity to do Brit Milah and you don't do it, the consequence of your behavior is you're cut off from the covenant because you never got in. Got the idea? So there's one other mitzvah taseh that you're chayv karet if you don't do it, which is Brit Milah, which is Pesach. You're cut, yeah. Now we see the word karet, we'll get in Parak Tet Vav with Brit Ben Avtarim. What?
Not being cut off, you never entered.
You never entered, but it's a consequence. But karet always relates to the covenant. What's the main mitzvah we're chayv karet for? That's it, but I want mitzvah when you're doing something wrong. But what, if you're chayv karet, there's one thing that's like the easiest way to get karet. What? Eating dam, that's, who eats dam and chaleb? We don't need to, we have kosher meat. What? Chilul Shabbat. Now, Chilul Shabbat, you're chayv karet. How do we know that? Is that in the Ten Commandments that you're chayv karet if you don't Chilul Shabbat? I'll show you where it is. Okay, we'll have a little bit of fun, and then I'll give you the source sheet finally. Open up Parshat Tetzaveh. You know this by heart, but you didn't pay attention. Parshat Tetzaveh, Perek Lamed Aleph in Shemot. Shemot Lamed Aleph. I'll give you everything in a source sheet in 1 second. Okay, Perek Lamed Aleph Pasuk Yud Bet. The Mishkan, we just had seven chapters about building the Mishkan. Remember, the Mishkan is going to remind us of God's presence, etc. That's our sort of our symbol of our connection to God. It's not the first Aliyah, so we're not familiar. Perek Lamed Aleph. Oh, it is Rishon, but it's not a Rishon Monday and Thursday Rishon. It's just it's the first Aliyah on Shabbos, but it's not a Monday Thursday Rishon. That's a long Rishon because we don't want. We give Levi Chet Ego, stuff like that. Now, what's it say? Have it? Vayomer Hashem Moshe Lemor. Perek Lamed Aleph. I didn't mean Tetzaveh. I meant Kitisa. My mistake. Kitisa. Parsha Kitisa. Perek Lamed Aleph. Pasuk Yud Bet. It's right before Chet Ego. Have it? Lamed Aleph Yud Bet. Vayomer Hashem Moshe Lemor. Vata daber b'nei Yisrael Lemor. I just commanded you to build the Mishkan. 7 chapters about building the Mishkan, remember? Vasita. And now, even though you're commanded to build the Mishkan, it doesn't override Shabbat. Don't we know that from here? Now, therefore, because of this pasuk, what defines Melech on Shabbat? Anything that was needed to build the Mishkan. Okay? Now, why? Why can't you do work on Shabbat? Ki oti beini u'beinechem l'dorotechem Ladat, our weekly reminder that God sanctified us to be His people is Shabbat. Shabbat is an Od Brit. Ebenezer has a beautiful song. Oti lo meyad beino ubeni ki yishmera Shabbat el yishmereni. Ebenezer understood that because he read Chumash. Explain Chumash. Now, where's that phrase Ki ani Hashem mekadishchem? Where's that coming from? Where's it say Ani Hashem mekadishchem? I mean, in davening we said Mekadesh Yisrael b'Yom HaZikaron, Mekadesh Yisrael b'Rosh Chodeshim, Mekadesh Yisrael b'Azmanim. But where's Atabachatan Mikabim Aftotanu B'Kidashtanu? Yeah, at Har Sinai. Remember Brit Sinai? You were there. What was the proposition of Brit Sinai? Oh, if you have another finger, keep your finger here, but go to Perek Yotet, Pasuk Hey. Remember, we get to Har Sinai in Parsha Yitro. We read this morning, but people are falling asleep. Remember, it's the third month. We left Egypt in Perek Yotet, and we go from Refidim to Har Sinai. And God calls Moshe to come up the mountain and go to Mar Beit Yaakov, and look what I did for you. And Pasuk Hey, Bata. In light of what I did for you and everything, go tell the people, Im Shemoa Tishmu B'Koli, Ushmartem Et Briti, that's Brit Sinai coming up, Vitem Li Skula Mikol Amim Ki Li Kol Haaretz, Vatem Tiuli, Mamlechet Koni B'Goy Kadosh. I'm making a proposition to you. Now look what I did for you. Now do you want to work for me? Look what I did for you. Are you willing to obey me, be my covenantal partner? And if you accept that, then you'll be a nation representing God, Mamlechet Kohanim, and a Goy Kadosh, a nation separated in the service of God. So our reminder of that Brit is going to be Shabbat. Therefore, Shabbat is an oath Brit. Now, if Shabbat is our sort of wedding ring, that's why Chazal compared it to a wedding, if keeping Shabbat is our weekly reminder and our commitment to be God's people, then it should be a Brit Olam, shouldn't it be? And if someone intentionally desecrates the Sabbath day, what in essence is he saying? I don't identify with the symbol of the Brit. Therefore, what's the consequence? We'll look at the next line. Ushmartem et Shabbat ki kodesh lachem, machalaleha mot yumat koseh bo melacha b'nichrat hanefeshim b'ker b'mea. When do we get chiyuv karet for Shabbat? Only after it becomes an oath Brit. Got that? Yeah, don't be surprised. Just like in the realm of time, Shabbat is our reminder of Har Sinai. In the realm of space, what's the reminder of Har Sinai? Is the Mishkan. And therefore, all the other chiyuv karet is doing something wrong in the temple. Coming tamei to the temple. There's any mistreating, a lack of respect for the temple is karet, and a lack of respect for Shabbat will be karet, because they're all symbols of the covenant. And later we'll see why chelev and dam, because it has to do with korbanot, which go back to the mikdash. Now, therefore, you're supposed to work 6 days a week. Pasuk Tedvav. Sheish yemim yasem malacha b'yom hashvi Shabbaton kodesh l'Hashem koseh malacha bot yumat. And then the rest we can sing. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et Shabbat. V'asot Shabbat levan brit olam. Beinu ben b'nei oti olam. You catching on? Now, what's the connection between Brit Milah and Brit Sinai? Brit Milah is the same idea at the seed level. Because Brit Sinai is a covenant between God and a people, capital P. But Avram's not a people yet. But God's planting the seeds of a nation called Zer Avraham with Brit Milah. I can't make a covenant with the people until they're a people. What makes us a people? In Egypt, we became a people. Thanks to we got oppressed by the Egyptians. We developed our national identity in someone else's land. That's going to be Brit Ben Abtarim. That was earlier in the Parsha. And now, what do we have? Now we have a Brit. Now we have a Now we have a nation. Now the nation can enter a Brit with God, and therefore Brit Sinai is basically a fulfillment of a Brit Milah. Now finally, let me give us the source sheet. We should have given this out a long time ago. Yeah, pass these around. Pass these around. Pass these around. Yeah, that should be next to the review. Pass those around. Okay. Well, okay. I just did a little page to review everything we did. We reviewed God's names, the classic names of Elohim and Yud Kei Vav Kei, and read that quickly. And then I see we have for Brit Keshet in Roman numeral 2. So from Brit Keshet, Brit Milah, Brit Sinai, there's the development of theme. So we have the psukim from Brit Milah, and then the psukim from Brit Keshet to Brit Milah, and showing the parallels between them. But it's just highlighting everything we just did. Make sense? It's just for homework, for review. On this side of it. Now, and then it would be great if I had the same psukim Bahar Sinai. So open up Parshat Bahar, which belongs where? It's in Vayikra, chapter 25, but where does Parshat Bahar belong? Back in Har Sinai, back in Sefer Shmot, in what we just read before. So we have every 7 years Shemitah, etc. And then in Parshat Bechukotai, look at Perek Chavav now in Vayikra. I'd rather you see it inside your Chumash. Perek Chavav. Parsha Bechukotai, but Perek Chavav in Sefer Vayikra. In Perek Chavav, I'll show you. Look at the. We'll start with Maftir from Parshat Bahar. This Perek Chavei Pasuk Nun Hey. Ki li b'nei Yisrael v'dim avadayim asher tzeitu otem eretz Mitzrayim ani Hashem Elokechem. I'm Hashem your boss. That's the first line of the Ten Commandments. Anochi Hashem Elokecha. Again, Lo tzedchem elilim. That's the Ten Commandments. Ki ani Hashem Elokechem. Pasuk Bet. Eshavtai tishmoro mitashi tiro ani Hashem. Those are the reminders in the realm of time and space. Shabbat and Mikdash. Ani Hashem. Now, then if you follow my laws and keep my mitzvot, then what? Then you'll get rain at the right time, etc., and you'll be blessed, and you'll live in peace, etc. Okay. Skip to pasuk tet after all these blessings. Ufaniti alechem. Have that? Perek Chava pasuk tet. Ufaniti alechem. Vifreiti etchem. Birbeiti etchem. Vakimotet briti etchem. What brit is that? That's Brit Sinai, isn't it? With plural. Now, then v'achatem yashan nosham v'yashan b'nei chadash totziu. V'natati mishkani b'tochechem. That's in the realm of space. V'lo tigal nafshi etchem. Now pasuk yudbet. V'talachti b'tochechem. I like that. Back to Gan Eden. V'aiti lechem lalohim v'atem tidli la'am. That's the phrase, isn't it? That's the song on Yom Kippur. Okay. And ani Hashem lokechem asher tzeitu etchem eretz Mitzrayim. Don't you see Sinai, the Brit at Sinai? Brit Milah is the promo for Brit Sinai. Now, the main theme of Chumash is Brit Sinai. That's the theme of Chumash. We're a nation eternally chosen to serve God. But it begins at a seed level with Avraham Avinu. The whole process of becoming that nation, the historical process, will be Brit of Tarim. That's a separate share. That's Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei. But now, sort of built into nature, will be Brit Milah, which is setting the stage for Brit Sinai. Yeah.
It's interesting that because the people were evil and Hashem destroyed the world through water, the bracha to keep his bread is water.
Yeah, but Geshem, it goes back to the first line in Gan Eden. Why come nothing's growing? Why is nothing growing? No, of course, Hashem Lohim Tir, but that's not true. Things grow. So what's Rashi saying? I need Adam to pray for rain, to appreciate rain. The rabbis aren't there. I'll show you what better one. I mean, even better. We have this Brit Milah is about being God's people. Now, a Brit Olam is an eternal Brit. But individual people can't be eternal, because Admei Avesrim. So, but being Jewish, you have an eternal commitment to be God's people. How can you eternally be God's people if you don't live forever? There's one way to solve the problem. You have to have children. Is there a commandment for the Jewish people specifically to have children? Because of Brit Sinai. Understand? Because Brit Sinai is a Brit Olam, Am Yisrael is eternally obligated to be God's people. And therefore, the rabbis are right on the mark. What do they know? There's got to be a mitzvah to have children, because that's how you fulfill Brit Sinai. Now go find me a pasuk. Understand? Because to have a chiyuv right, I need a pasuk. So it doesn't say that explicitly, thing, but where does it say it? That's they take the pasuk by Noach. You follow? Vatem. Yeah, you understand how the rabbis are reading Chumash? It's so deep and they're so on the mark. But that's because Brit Milah is a Brit Olam. But a part of the Brit Olam is you're chosen forever, and you have to keep it going. Now, there might be a connection by where we put that reminder and having children. When you get older, you can figure that out. Okay? Hope you understood. And then, why is circumcision? Why is that a good place to put a reminder? You have to be God's people forever. Because the connection between that and having children. Yeah.
The rabbis work very hard to say that the three commandments in Bereshit are not where you get the mitzvah from. Now you're saying they're working very hard to say that Hebrew is the mitzvah in Bereshit.
But only the line, only pasuk zayin, it's not the first plural rule. It's not plural rule from day 5 or day 6 in creation. It's not the plural rule of the first line to Noach. It's only the last line of plural rule, which God's no longer talking to Bnei Noach, because they're not hard of hearing, but rather, Vatem plural rule, that's Am Yisrael. The read, it's not pshat, it's super duper drash. I want you to appreciate how Chazal work. They're not saying that's Pshuto Shel Mikra. It's Pshuto Shel Torah. You understand the difference? But they're on to something big. But when you understand that I call that the rabbinic acrobatics. But if you don't know your psukim and the themes, you won't appreciate what they're up to. Remember, for something to be a chiyuv d'oraisa, it's imperative that I find a pasuk with a command. Otherwise, it's not a chiyuv d'oraisa. Now we have to get to. So now we had in B'chukotay we have the same. The Levim have that phrase all over. Remember Hoshea lo amiatem vatem lo. Remember the lo ruchama. Remember the Haftan Hoshea lo ami v'lo ruchama. And then you take to the desert now again, and that would be I'll be varistik lo lam varistik li b'tzedek. Yeah, but it's the same idea. We're going to re-establish the brief.
Many people who go to shul know have powers, but they don't know the rest of nothing.
Yeah, at least it's better than nothing. That's going to be the next year.
Except for the members of the Kiddush Club.
Yeah. Well, they get to miss the rabbi's speech also. So.
It's rocket.
Yeah. But the Kiddush Club, someone asked the Gabbai, "Is the rabbi still speaking?" So the Gabbai said, "No, he finished speaking 5 minutes ago. Now he's just talking." Okay, so again, the sources are all here, but I hope my point's clear. Now, I finally want to get to the back page. We're not going to get the whole page, but it's your homework. What do we get now? Why is God's name introducing this El Shaddai? Understand? Why all of a sudden Avram's name change is going to be preceded by God introducing a new name. The name El Shaddai is unique to Sefer Bereshit. It's only once in Shemot talking about Sefer Bereshit. Remember Parsha Be'era, that's a Rishon? Be'era Avram Yisrael Be'el Shaddai, Ushbi Yud Kei Lo Nodati Lehem. How, that's, I don't want to get into how we explained that. I didn't make myself known to them. I talked to them about that name, but didn't make myself known. Coming out of Egypt, everyone will know Yud Kei Vav Kei. Now, so that's the first pasuk. So Ramban has to explain what's his special name. Now, if you look carefully, there's 2 times in Chumash where God says Ani El Shaddai. 2 times. One is here, right before God changes Abram's name to Avraham. Take a wild guess when the next time God will say, my name is El Shaddai. When he changes Yaakov to Yisrael. Isn't that neat? No, there's a filtering process. We have Zer Avraham, but not all of Zer Avraham. Only some of it. The so-called filtering process of Sefer Bereshit begins with El Shaddai and ends with El Shaddai. Understand? Yaakov tried to explain that to his kids before he died. I'm not sure if they got it. You know what I'm talking about? El Shaddai knew Abelus Ben's command by Berechoti, Yaakov knew this year. He's a forefather. The kids are too busy fighting, playing politics. Where are we up to? I was reading something. Ramban, yeah, Ramban and El Shaddai. So, I said I was going to show you the pasuk in Perek Lamed Hey. Look in Bereshit Lamed Hey, because it's really neat, because that's another candidate for the commandment of Purvu. In Perek Lamed Hey, pasuk Tet, probably pasuk Tet. Yaakov just got back from all his trouble, coming back from Padan Aram. He got married, had kids. Pasuk Yud first. V'emer lo Elohim Shimcha Yaakov v'ikra Shimcha Yaakov ki Yisrael Yeshmecha v'ikra Shmo Yisrael. V'emer lo Elohim Ani El Shaddai. Pray urvei goy ukal goy mimeka v'melchim mechatzei yitzeo. That could also be a purvu, isn't it? Pray urvei. I think I would have chosen that one, but I didn't make it to. I liked Chazal's a little bit better. Got that? And then the Arsa Shantate Abraham. Don't you see the echoes of Brit Milah right there? That's matching now, because that's when the Bechira process ends. And now who's ever chosen, no matter how good they are, you can sleep with your father's wife, but you're still chosen. Remember what I'm talking about? You can try to kill your brother, you're still chosen. Yeah, what? But that's the theme. Let's go back to the Ramban. So Ramban wants to explain what's this name El Shaddai. Now, there's a big argument whether the shin is part of the name. You understand? Is it Shaddai? That is enough. You follow? Or Shaddai like Shoded? So do you understand the difference? How do I read the shin in Shaddai? What's the name for that in grammar? The shin that's not part of the word. It's a prefix. That's it. Oh, now, look. Shnei Shemot Kol Echad Ter Latzmo. El Shaddai says El and Shaddai are 2 different names. Okay? Upirush El Takif, strong, powerful. Miloshon Ele Moav. Upirush Shaddai Amarashi Sheish Dai Be'Elohutav L'Chol Bria. He's a supplier. Sheyesh, get that? Dai is the main word. There's enough. But you understand Rashi's drasha? Shaddai? Okay. It was Sefer Mor Nevuchim. That's the Rambam's Mor Nevuchim. Pirush the Rambam. Klomar, she'eno tzarich b'mitziut ma shenimtza v'lo b'kiyum b'mitziutel l'zulato abo b'mitziutel mitzat. In a nutshell, he's saying philosophically, God is everything. He doesn't need anything. No, he has everything he needs, but he's doing us a favor by creating. No, God is all. No, God's not part of creation. It's like anti-Spinoza. No, God's separate from his creation and he created, but that's classical philosophy. Now, we'll skip Rambam for now. Then he likes quoting Ibn Ezra, especially when he likes to disagree with him. Rabbi Avraham Piresh, that's Ibn Ezra. B'Shem Anagid. Migzot Shoded. Not Shedai, but rather, the Shin is part of the Shoresh. B'Loshin Shoded. Shoded is, what's a Shoded? He's like, grabs, he's in control of everything. Right? Kolomar Menatzech U'Shoded Ma'arachot HaShamayim. God can control the heavens and the earth and everything he created. B'zeh ha'nachon. Okay, he agrees with Ibn Ezra. Okay? Ki midat ha'gvura min hagat ha'olam shomru b'chachamim midat hadin shamata. That's basically God controls nature. Because what is God? Nature seems to go by a set of rules, or maybe by chance, or by what's called histabrut. What's histabrut? By that probability, as Schrodinger, and or Gauss, the Gaussian curve. You remember the best way to explain? If I have 1,000 marbles, I know how they're going to come up in a curve, but I have no idea what that one marble is going to happen. That's the best way to explain hashgacha pratit. You follow? There's hashgacha on the 1,000 marbles is going to be a Gaussian curve if you know your statistics, but I have no idea where that one marble is going to fall. Each marble. No. Amazon knows that also. They know what you're going to buy before you do. Now, don't go back now. B'tam laskir atah zeh Hashem. We got 2 minutes left. Ki bo yasu anisim anisturim latzadikim latzim mimavet nafsham liachtom barav ufiotem b'melchama micher v'chol anisim anasim l'Avram l'avot k'chol ba'im b'torat parsha im b'chukatai. I'll explain what he's saying because we're running out of time. I'll use a bad analogy. He's saying, Yud Kei Vav Kei will explain, that's rules, that's coming out of Egypt, that's the plagues, that's miracles, that's in your face, you can't miss it. A miracle, B'Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei, wool. That's primarily the 10 plagues and Har Sinai. In our desert, that's a miraculous existence. Where God's presence is just felt, you're there, you can't miss it. It's called Hitgalut. Nature appears to be nature. And nature, to some people, hides God, some people, through nature, can find God. But nature has its rules. Sometimes God, within the framework of nature, we get what's called hashgacha pratis. You follow? Where you look at with something. So, Kel Shaddai is not going to create immaculate birth. That would be Yud Kei Vav Kei, or a different religion. But someone with fertility issues, El Shaddai can help them with the fertility issues. You understand what he's getting at? Because what's about to happen? They're having trouble having children. God can help them have children. Understand? That's what he's saying. Notice, before Brit Milah, God's saying, you've had fertility problems in the framework of Elohim, which is Puravu in nature. I can fix that for you because I made that system. That's all he's saying. He's saying he's relating the name El Shaddai for Avraham finally being able to have children from Sarah and solving the fertility issue. That's how he explains Shaddai. And then, we have to finish up. But that's his thing. What I call is Elohim. I'm sorry. Shem Kel Shaddai is Elohim on steroids. That's how I explain my. Anyone understand that? No, it's Elohim. There's a set of rules, but how much can you play with the rules? If you know a Jewish accountant, you know what I'm talking about. No, if you ever file your taxes, no one knows what I'm talking about. You follow the rules, but you play with them a little bit, but stay within the rules. So that's a really bad analogy. You get my point. Ramban would use that analogy. Yeah, but what Ramban is trying to say is that Elohim is there's still nature, but El Shaddai is, what do you call it? It's like by nature, if you slip on a banana, you'll fall down, right?
Wait, so what's the difference between El Shaddai and Yud Kei Vav?
Okay, keep reading. Okay. He'll say here. That's Avraham, but I'll show you where he talks about that. Here. In the Ki imi nateva shivu agshamim, the third paragraph. Ki imi nateva agshamim bitamba badam. No, bloshu agshamim kebarzel kasher nizras. He says it's the fact that it rains when we keep mitzvot and doesn't rain when we don't keep mitzvot. Rain is still nature, but when rain comes, that's God. That's within Elohim, within the laws of nature, but having a correlation between them. There's no change in nature. So the manna falling, what else was there? Splitting the sea, the 10 plagues. That's Yud Kei Vav Kei. That's Ani Hashem Lo Nodati Lehem. He says the same thing in Vayera in the beginning, where we talked about. I spoke to the boat Bel Shaddai, which means Hashem. He's talking about not how God talked to them, but rather He made Himself known. So the boat did need big miracles to build the belief. Like little things, little simanim are good. That's like fixing elections and saving assassinations and things like that. Still, no, just come modern day examples. What else was there? Okay, we have to finish because we need the 10-minute break. But just on your own, hitalech lefanai is that beautiful. The lechet b'derech ora, to walk with God, to lead the way with God, and tamim is having pure belief, not pure belief, but trusting God and not putting your faith in thing. And then he says what's really cute at the very end. He says the oath of what he called. He says at the very end, he explains what tamim is, etc. And Vanochel Mashiparashti is ot keshabbat. That Shabbat, that Brit Milah is a note like Shabbat is a note. He was in he did what we did, didn't he? Because he realized that Brit Milah is an oath Brit of, and Shabbat is the oath Brit of Brit Sinai. It's all the same Brit at the seed level, and once we become a nation. So that was that's if you want, you can read it later on their own, but their thing. One last word. How do you feel hitalech lefanai? Is to walk with God. So, do we have a guidebook about how to walk with God? It's called the Torah, right? It's an instruction book. Now, let's say someone wants to walk with God, but he's facing a dilemma. In this situation, what's the best way to walk with God? Okay. So, who do you ask? A rabbi. And the psak the rabbi gives, what do we call that psak? Halacha, which you thought meant law. But isn't that a beautiful word Chazal used for Jewish law? Because in essence, when the rabbis paskin something, what do? They're telling you how to walk with God. So just the word halacha is really deep. We don't pay attention to it. That's why I end with because it has to do with I put that in because hitalech lefanai is the reason why halacha. I think the first thing God told Avraham was lech lecha, something like that. And the last thing He tells him is lech lecha by the Akedah. So halicha. So now we can all get up and walk and take a drink and take a break. Okay, we have to stop the thing. How do we stop this? Stop. Stop. Hour and 3 minutes, okay? 1 second. It's still taping.